And so, well, I don't think I've ever met Lisa before, but my name's Megan. I am with MindsEye. I'm the arts and culture director. I am a white woman in my mid-40s with long gray hair. So here is the purpose of this session was really to try to come up with some practical solutions for some problems that we run into from the venue side, from the partnership side, from our side, from every side, and see if we can make things work a little better. So I want to make sure that everyone gives permission to themselves to like maybe make a mistake or use the wrong terminology or say something that you're not quite sure of. One of us, if we know or if we think it's incorrect, we will correct you, and that's totally fine. The example I've been giving as some outdated terminology that people still use for whatever reason, people still say handicap parking, which I think for most things people don't use the word handicap, but for whatever reason people still say handicap parking. So I would say, hey, let's change that and not use that term. So it's totally fine. We're all friends here.
Parking and restrooms, those are the
Yeah.
two holdouts.
Yeah, it kills me especially when everything seems very up to date and everything. Oh, this is a very accessible place, and then they say the handicap parking is over here, and I'm like, what? So just feel free.
Honestly, I think that part of that too is that when people used to think about accessibility, they thought about it from a purely physical standpoint.
Oh yeah.
Could a person on crutches or in a wheelchair access the space? But nowadays, except the definition of accessibility has expanded so much more, and it's more common and familiar for people to think, oh, what if someone is blind? What if someone is deaf? What if someone has autism? What if, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
they're like, what that means in terms of accessibility is different now than it used to be.
I agree, and it's thank goodness. Thank goodness.
I agree. As an ambulatory wheelchair user, I totally agree.
Yes. So actually, let's do some quick intros. I don't know if Natalie is actually here. If you are here, Natalie.
I am.
Okay.
I swear.
Do you want to do an intro real quick?
Yes. My name is Natalie Webb. I am the Art and Accessibility Coordinator with MindsEye. I am a white woman in my early 30s with long brown hair. And if you ever see me without my hoop earrings in, please ask if I'm okay.
Natalie and I talk a lot about image description and self-description, and we go to these meetings and some of the times we're like, we don't care, why is this description so long? And the idea of like describing what you think is important to you, or for if you had someone that might not recognize you that had sight but might recognize you because of XYZ. And so it cracks me up because I actually hadn't noticed that Natalie always wears hoop earrings until she did an in self-description, and I was like, oh my gosh, she does always have hoop earrings in. So it makes sense to me, and for whatever reason it cracks me up every time. So Vicki, do you want to tell us who you are?
Sure. Where you're with? My name is Vicki Kahn. I'm the development associate with Laumeier Sculpture Park, which means that I'm primarily the grant writer, but do all sorts of other things as well. I am a white woman who just turned 51 with short dark hair and glasses.
And Lisa.
And my name is Lisa Rohr, and I am the Senior Director of Programs at the Delta Gamma Center for Children with Visual Impairments. And I am a white woman that is in her late 40s and pretending to not be, with dirty blonde hair that is mid-length. And I sometimes wear glasses and sometimes I don't. It depends on how far away the thing is from me.
Great. So again, small group, and we are set to go until 5. If we get done before that, that's cool. But we will stop at 5. We're all going home. Actually, no, I have another session after that. So, but the idea is that we want to try to get some answers what we've been doing here. So, and I did get a few questions that came in from people that couldn't come to the sessions. So that's where a lot of these questions come from. And I have found that with this first question, we tend to also talk about and answer many of the other questions just by asking question number one, which is the number one question we get from venues all of the time. And when I say venues, I mean really every place that we work with. That means theaters and museums, cultural institutions, sporting events, everything. And the question is always, we offer audio description, but no one who is blind ever uses it, or a very small number of people who are blind use this service. How do we get people to come? And I think one thing is probably the major thing is communication breakdown. You know, it's oftentimes it doesn't get to everyone that needs to know in a timely manner that something is available, or someone, you know, it's possible, folks, that maybe your show's not really that popular. You know, maybe someone just doesn't want to go to it. It happens. Or, you know, your whatever event, or it's just at a bad time of day, or, you know, it just doesn't work. But usually there are people that want to go to things, but they are not able to go to them. So how can we help break down some of those barriers and get people out to these events? And number one being, make sure they know that it's happening. And I think that has to come from many directions. Right now, for a lot of our venues, that's coming mostly from MindsEye. Natalie sends out an email every week on a Friday of every event that we have coming forward, going forward, I guess. And it depends on, you know, kind of what we have going on, how big that email is. So it may, this weekend, from today's Thursday, from today through Saturday, we have 8 events. So a lot of that email is stuff that's literally happening this weekend. But it also goes on farther than that. So we send out an email to, I looked it up earlier, somebody asked me, like, a pop quiz. It was 181 people are on that list. And those are people who have ever registered to go to an audio description event, who have shown up to an audio description event. We send them the rest of them, or people who just ask to be on the list. We also do Facebook posts for every event, and we try to get the word out as best we can. We have found that a lot of our venues are not really doing that. Some are, some aren't, some are. It's just not front, accessibility isn't front of mind. Even though they're, you know, they're paying us, they're paying their ASL interpreters, they might be paying a captioner, they, you know, but oftentimes not everyone knows, even in their own organization, when those events are happening. So one thing we're trying to figure it out, how it's, what's a better way to communicate with people in our communities, that these events are even available. And one thing we've talked about a couple times today already is when we send out those emails that our partner organizations, they're sharing those emails too, or they're sharing our Facebook post, or, you know, everyone is coming from different directions. I did have a pro tip on those emails. We talked about, we send out that email and then a lot of our folks will forward it to, you know, another group. Just be careful, because there's an unsubscribe button at the bottom there. And when you forward that email and someone hits unsubscribe, they're unsubscribing you. They're not unsubscribing themselves, which is something that occurs on a regular basis. Or even, it might not be that we send it to you and you know, you forward it every week to every person you know, but it might be, hey, here's something that's interesting that I think applies to Lisa's at Delta Gamma. So, you know, this is a kids show. This might be great for, you know, this, or this is a family friendly thing that's happening. So trying to make sure that everyone is kind of helping everybody else out. And so that we know if Delta Gamma has even something that's not affiliated really with MindsEye audio description or even about the arts, but if you have some sort of event on, that we're all just sharing everything for everybody to get the communities more connected, is really what we're looking for. Any other thoughts on communication? One thing we talked about too, this is interesting because Laumeier is not a theater. So some of the things I keep pointing to theater, but they all can work for different things. But one thing we talked about is maybe offering I'm calling them other incentives, but I don't know that they're really an incentive, just additional things that could happen just because, particularly with theater, but think outside the box. Just because a performance has audio description, maybe if it had audio description and a touch tour or an insight tour, or they had touch tables, or they had talk with the actors, or a meet and greet with the actors, something like that, that's in addition to just the audio described performance. And
So
go
I
ahead.
know for Laumeier, there's not a lot of things that we do that involve audio descriptions. And I think that's, mostly because we're talking about exhibitions. And again, when you're talking about art, it's very subjective. So to describe a piece of artwork to someone, that's going to be that particular person's view of it. You know what I mean? Like they could describe the colors and they might say, oh, it has this energetic presence or whatever, but maybe that's not what someone else would see if they could see it in the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And people sometimes say, oh, audio description, it's the audio describer is the lens through which a blind person sees. And Vicki, I'm sure, has heard me say this before. We always say that the audio describer is actually more like the prism through which that person is seeing, because every person is going to give you a different description because of their life and their knowledge. And specifically for a place like Laumeier, or we're working with Pulitzer now on image descriptions, or museums. It's important, I think, for people to understand when they're listening to the description, that this is the description I'm giving you. This is not the description that Vicki would give you. This is not the description that Lisa would give you. And here's why it's my description. And that's why I do love live tours. And when you actually can interact back and forth, when someone says, oh, well, you said it was this color and it feels like XYZ. Well, that color says to me this other thing. And there's more of a connection there. But that's a little, that's audio description talk.
Because we have an event coming up that's called Laumeier After Dark, and it's the only night of the year when people are allowed to be in the park at night, right? And although someone who is completely blind and has no shadow or light visual capability might not get as much out of it, if you have sort of any sense of light, shadow, or color, there's light installations throughout the park. The whole place is lit up. There's performers that are walking around, both musical and otherwise. There's fire pits, you know what I mean? So there is that sort of opportunity to have that engagement. But I think that a lot of people, probably amongst the disability community, are thinking, oh, it's the park at night, is it going to be safe for me to navigate that?
Right.
So I think that for us, that's part of the reason why we're working on this app, Megan, because we feel like once we can get those audio descriptions of, getting from point A to point B, it'll be much easier to say, oh, if you want to go listen to the music, point yourself here,
Yeah. Yeah. And and actually that's one thing that even for me personally as a sighted person, but a lot of people talk about wanting to have information in advance. They want to be prepared when they go somewhere. They want to know what door they're going to enter through, because it's, sighted people, we can walk around and say, there's a door here, there's a door here. Even if I go in this door, I can see that counter over there. It's fine. We need to have that information to give them in advance. You're going to go in the left door and then you're going to turn to your right. So having information in advance and putting it on your website, it's really important, or sending it to us. We actually, for every event that we have that's an in-person live event, anyone that registers or lets us know that they're coming, I send out an email in advance that says, okay, you've registered for this event on this day at this location. And then here's the ambassador who's going to be there that you can talk to. This is the name of that person that will be there. And then also here's some know before you go information for that venue that's very specific of, you know, here's where the accessible bathrooms are. Here's where you pick up your device. Here's where you pick up your ticket. Having all of that information in advance is really helpful for me too, as a sighted person. But I think the feedback that we get is it's helpful to have that in advance. Something else that we have talked about for as one of those, you know, maybe other incentives is, or just in general, getting the word out, is working with MindsEye to have some promos that are maybe a little more specific to people who are blind or partially sighted. And this, again, more theater related, but things that are like having the actors themselves introduce themselves, just a little bit of audio that can be a Facebook post, or it doesn't even have to be a video if you don't want it to be, but just the actors introducing their character. Things like that have been really popular for some other places. There's a Looking Glass Playhouse, a community theater on the Illinois side here. They did just a little Facebook video. It was a little fun video that they were doing that was in the green room before a show started. And someone just walked around with a phone and said, introduce yourself as your character. And it was not meant to be for people who are blind. It was not about audio description. It was nothing, but it was great because every person, whether some of them were like in costume, some were not in costume, some were like halfway made up. They immediately changed their personality. And especially if they were not in costume yet, would describe what their costume would be, that they would be wearing. And I was like, this is perfect. This is what every place should be doing in advance for people who are coming for audio description. So they have all this information in advance. So things like that are helpful to get the word out, I think, too. So
do the sites that do this, like Laumeier, do they, you know, or others like that, I'm not calling you out, but just in general, like when there is an event that they're doing, did I understand you correctly in that, like, when they're promoting it on their end, but they're not necessarily promoting like this particular one is going to have the audio? Did I understand that correctly?
So that is something that varies widely between our venues. What we would love to see is for every venue to promote it very much and as easily as possible for everyone to find out. So like if I wanted to go, well, I guess that might be a bad example because they're good at this, but the Muni has description on every Saturday and every Monday. And it's very easy to find out on their website. It's listed on like if you wanted to go see Little Shop of Horrors and you went down the list, the ones with ASL and audio description are listed right there. So it's very easy to find. There are other venues where you kind of have to dig around to find it. There are venues that, and you know, this is, again, accessibility is not at the forefront. So they might have 25 promotional posts about a show, and maybe 0 of those even mention that audio description is available.
Right.
Or one mentions audio description is available, but doesn't tell you which day it is. You know, things like that. And one thing that we're going to try to start working on, we're in the middle of getting some new hires. So we're going to have some more social media happening. Is interacting more with posts from our venues. So not just sharing a post that a venue might have that just says, you know, here's a show that's happening, but replying or commenting on that post on Facebook that says, you know, MindsEye will be describing this show on this date. Oftentimes that encourages the venue to say, oh, we should have mentioned that. Or just in those comments where every time we actually do it, I'm surprised someone's like, oh, what is audio description? Or there's a conversation that happens there. So we would love for every venue to be promoting audio description all of the time. Every time, you know, every time you have a list of show dates and you have audio description and ASL or, you know, captions, whatever you're having, list those there too. Whether it's, and whatever it is, even if it's somebody mentioned a newspaper ad earlier, I'm like, I don't know many theaters that are doing newspaper ads, but if you're doing it, put it in there. you don't know what people are using. You don't know what kind of accessibility tools people are using. So don't just say, oh, they're blind, they're not reading the newspaper. Well, probably if they're under 60, they might not be reading a newspaper, but or they're reading it online and their screen reader is reading it to them. So
Right, exactly.
Or they're listening to the newspaper being read by MindsEye Radio on our broadcast.
Right.
So they should be saying it. So we feel like oftentimes MindsEye is the only place they're getting the information from. Or it's a kind of an accident, like so they'll show up there and say, oh, we didn't know you had audio description here. Like,
Right.
yeah, we do.
Right.
So that's
And,
really where
like,
we're missing the boat.
And I think also with a place like Laumeier, where again, it's not like a theater or something
Right.
where you have these regular big general public performances. If
Mhm.
we have a visitor who needs ASL interpretation or something along those lines, they need to contact us in advance. And I think a lot of
Sure.
people don't realize
Yeah.
that you can't just assume, because we have to pay an individual to come out and do that.
To do
We
it.
don't have somebody on staff who's just natural. That would be lovely.
Right.
But it
Right.
just so happens that right now we don't have
Right.
anyone who's fluent in ASL. We have fluent Spanish speakers.
Yeah.
So I
But we
mean,
need those too. So.
Right. And we've engaged folks in the community to translate materials into Bosnian and things like that for various audiences for exhibitions that needed that. But I think that that's sort of one of the challenges. People think about ASL for deaf visitors, and they're not really thinking, how is this going to affect a blind visitor? Because especially in a museum space like our Aronson, which is our indoor gallery, it's very echoey because it's a huge room with giant ceilings. That doesn't make for the easiest, cocktail effect kind of conversation. And we've noticed this when we've tried to, record artist talks or curator talks inside the gallery. Unless they have a microphone near them or a lav on, it just echoes. And it's hard for me, even as a sighted person, hearing person who's looking at their lips move and hearing it, still having trouble to interpret it. So I think that a big part of that is, also like, how do we let people know in the community, hey, if you need this, we just need you to let us know in advance, like more than a day. You know what I mean? And I know that, for example, on our for a lot of our events in the RSVP forms, we do ask, do you need any accommodations or that sort of thing? Hey, Jer. Sorry, my husband just got home. His headphones didn't connect, so sorry about the noise. So that's sort of what I'm wondering, like in your experience, because I think you guys probably see a lot more folks on a day-to-day who are dealing with various challenges related to accessibility. Is that a thing that's sort of commonly known in the community, that you need to call in advance for that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think for audio description and ASL in particular, and captions to some extent, again, particularly more for theater, but I think people are used to understanding that it's not a reasonable modification for you to walk in and ask for something. It's a reasonable modification if you ask for it in advance. And most people are going to go to the website and look for it. Like and I say that specifically more for a place like yours where, we're going to go to this place. Honestly, most places are going to assume that you don't have ASL and that you don't have audio description. So they might go to your website and look for it. And as long as it says there, these things are available with this much of advance notice. And oftentimes it's 2 weeks notice.
Okay.
Not
Okay,
always, but
know.
yeah, oftentimes it's, with a 2-week notice, we can make this happen. So as long as it's easy to get to the accessibility page.
Well, plus it's not like you'd think that we would be having 2 or 3 schools that do it, but we're not exactly swimming in ASL interpreters,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, and ASL interpreters are hard to come by at the moment. So
making me think maybe I need to change jobs,
yeah, I mean, they are in particular demand right now. The other thing I think for a place like yours, Vicki, is that a lot of people who are blind might just think, well, that's not a place for me to go to. Because in addition to it being really visual, you're also talking about traversing a landscape.
Yes.
right? So there's the additional challenge of those sort of things. And having a connection with some of these groups like Delta Gamma, like the Missouri School for the Blind, or Society for the Blind, and I know you have a connection with Lighthouse and that sort of thing, just so the communities are aware that that you are welcoming to visitors who are blind or partially sighted. You are, even if they don't know about the app yet, they do know that it's something that you're working on and that it's available to them, is
Yeah,
really
because like
important.
I can just, for example, we have clay classes, right? And we do
Mhm.
youth clay classes and we do adult clay classes. But clay is a very accessible media
Yeah,
for
yeah,
anybody to work in. It's
right.
very visceral, you know what I mean? It doesn't require that you're able to see where the flower is or any of that because you're literally touching it. So like being able to work with somebody in that way. We've talked about, should we perhaps consider doing a cohort of summer camp that's strictly for kids with visual impairment. You know what I mean? Right now, unfortunately, we don't have the staff to accommodate that, right?
Right.
But there's the potential for a partnership perhaps with an organization that would have staff to come and support that within the framework of what we already have going in the park, because we've worked with kids in wheelchairs, we've worked with kids on the spectrum, we've worked with kids with all sorts of challenges going on. And it's good for all of them to get out and make art and traverse the park and do all of that sort of thing. So as you know, Megan, that we've been on this hardcore accessibility push, and I feel like in 2024 you're really going to see a lot of expansion in that arena.
Great. And we actually are doing, it's interesting that you brought up a clay class. We're actually doing our first event with Blaze STL.
Yeah.
Next month they're having a showcase. So we're going to do an audio described tour with them for the showcase, because they actually they have a class for Society for the Blind that, and some of their pieces from that class from people from Society of the Blind are in the show. And that's what started the whole thing. Someone called and said, hey, they're having this thing, I would like I would like to know what the pieces are that are in this exhibit. That's a whole new thing for us, but that should be interesting. But something like that, and partnering, maybe with someplace like Delta Gamma or Missouri School for the Blind.
I was just
with-
thinking, hey, I mean, we can talk later.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. We have a STEAM program too that could, I'm sure, be modified to work with your kiddos, because we have about, I think it's 14 or 15 maquettes at the park that are near a bunch of the sculptures that was actually funded by Lighthouse for the Blind.
Nice.
So that there is a touchable. And it's interesting too, because I had when I got my wheelchair about a year ago, I tooled around the park. I was so excited. It was the first time I'd been able to do that in like 4 years. And I realized that because of the height of the concrete bases for those maquettes, that as a person in a wheelchair, I could barely reach them as a grown adult.
Oh,
So
yeah.
a child, trying to do that, that's a whole other ball of wax. So I think when they were initially conceived, it was with the idea of, if you're walking,
Yeah,
you'll be able to reach out and touch it, right?
Sure.
Without thinking about people in wheelchairs or small children.
right,
So,
right.
we're having to reinvestigate that, but that's a big process right there. But yeah, for a lot of the STEAM program, it is talking the kids through stuff, going one place to another and looking at the sculptures, because you're using them for things like estimation and things of that nature. So again, I feel like using just the sculptures that we have that have maquettes, we could easily do a STEAM tour. And then, the second half of that is actually building something, so like a sculpture that they get to take home themselves. So,
Right.
I do think, Lisa, we should talk, because
Yeah,
that could be a really
be
nifty
fun.
thing. Even if
Yeah.
it's like a summer camp or a spring or fall camp
Right.
kind of situation,
Yeah.
gets tougher in the winter months because we're an outdoor museum, but
Well, and I think just in general, there's illness and stuff, things, even when you do schedule and they get,
and ice, don't forget the ice.
Let's not talk about ice yet, Vicki. I'm not ready for ice. I'm not
Gonna
even
be a
ready
heavy
for this.
winter.
Can't go
All
there.
of my country cousins are saying so.
I'm not
I
even
just,
ready
now
for
that you
it
said
to
that, I
be.
just saw something come across, like just, your phone will get whatever. And it's, I mean, I just saw like the sentence that was like, you're going to get lots of snow this winter. I was like, how are we talking about that right now? It's 70 degrees outside.
No.
Yeah, but the bees are telling us and the persimmons are telling us. Where the
We're
oak
getting,
trees
we're
are
going to get
telling
a
us.
winter.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's kind of crazy.
Great. Another year of 12-inch snows or something like that.
Hey man, at least we can all work from home now, right?
Right. I was just going to say that. I was literally going to just say, well, we know how to do that now. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the big problems, probably the number one big problem we have, as people physically getting from where they are to
Yeah.
these venues. Transportation is a huge, huge problem, for even for places that have a bus stop right outside or Metrolink right outside. Transportation is the thing that comes up every time. A lot of our folks take Call a Ride, which is
Not
great
reliable.
to have available, but is not reliable. It only runs until, think about going to the theater, and it only runs to a certain time in the evening.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for getting home from places, which is part of the reason why we try to do a lot of our events in the afternoon, to make sure that our folks can get home. Because we have, people that have to leave during intermission because otherwise they're going to miss their Call a Ride or their Call a Ride won't be available. We actually have a good number of people who are really good at traversing public transportation, and know bus schedules like you would not believe, and Metrolink schedules. But I think it's really important to keep in mind how much longer that takes.
Yeah.
And adding that on to the time spent somewhere. So if you're going to have an event at your space it's 2 hours long, and you think, great, this is a 2-hour event, people just pop over, they do the event and they go home. Well, almost always that's a full day event.
Yeah.
Because of how long it takes to get from one place to another, and schedules, and even things like, on the weekends, if you're on the Red Line, or depending on where you are, like on the weekends in Belleville, when I take the Metrolink, there might be a 30-minute, there's 30 minutes between each train. So, suddenly that has really changes what time you have to leave, what time you have to get there. And understanding that. And then you have people that don't want to take public transportation by themselves, or with their friends even, or there's no public transportation close to where they are, or where you are, one of those places. And this is something that we have spent a lot of time today and many days talking about. How can we make transportation easier? And maybe that's working with ATS, which is basically Call a Ride in Illinois, even just, getting people sometimes to the Missouri side, or an event in Illinois, crossing that river, you might fall in. So trying to work that out, or for places that do have shuttles or buses, can we work out a system where you're having an event at this time on this one day? Can we work out between the venue and someplace like Society? And I don't know if you guys have buses or anything like that, Lisa, or shuttles.
We don't.
But if it's
really
MSB,
hard to get companies to pay for those types.
Yeah,
of
and
capital
that's the thing. Like, we don't have a bus, and we're not getting a bus. Like, I will absolutely, like, we do not provide transportation, period. But for some of those places that do, like MSB or something, how can we partner all to make that available, so they can have everyone has to come to, MSB. You have to get to MSB, but then we will take you from there to Laumeier. How is it the old Redbird Express sort of situation? If you're from the Illinois side, like, everyone knows you get to the mall and you can get to the Cardinal game.
Well, in Laumeier, we're in a particularly tough position. Like, when I came on board with them in 2019, I think it was the beginning of 2019, we had one bus stop It's across the street from the park. But let's say you live, I mean, even downtown, like
Yeah.
not even way up north, but just downtown.
Yeah.
It's almost a 2-hour bus ride just to get there.
Yeah.
And if you're coming from the roadside, there is not a sidewalk.
Yeah.
That entire road, right? So, and then about 2 years ago, they took our bus stop away.
Oh, wow. You don't
Yeah,
even have
so
that
like
one.
people you can't even take public transportation and get very close to us. You can take it down a Watson Road, but then you still got to walk a piece to get there.
And that's not a
So-
good area to be walking. I mean, it's not unsafe,
It's not
but it's
easy.
not there.
Like
It's
there's
not
a
easy.
hill, and if you're in a
Yes.
wheelchair or anything like
Right.
that's the way to go.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think it's easier for kids because, for example, and Lisa, you probably know about this, the National Park Service, even the Missouri one, has a grant program for getting buses to take trips to national parks and historic sites.
Oh, yes.
So that's very handy. And when we write our grants for our STEAM program and summer camp and those sorts of things, we include busing in that for the schools, and obviously that's based on NCES guidelines and things in terms of school districts and free and reduced lunches and all those sorts of things. But I think it's a lot easier on the kid side to be able to say, yeah, we'd love to pay for a bus to bring 20-30 kids to the park and have them have this experience. I think it gets tougher when it's adults, like you're saying. Like we don't really have a good public transportation option now. What is our option
What's
there?
the option?
Talk to Metro? Do they have the capability of even following through, even if we ask? Because we know there's a bus driver shortage. We know they
Right.
cut a bunch of stops partly for that reason. Like, I feel like it's systemically deeper than those of us who are trying to provide the services can even do anything about, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, I think in your actual spot, your actual location, public transportation is just not an option. So,
Yeah.
what are those options? And
even if you can find a bus company to pick them up at MindsEye to take them to the Muni or whatever it is, somebody's got to pay that bus company to do the back and forth. And like, where does that money come from?
Right.
I mean, we have a struggle with transportation too, of just getting, there's kids that would like to come to the programs, but they can't because there's nobody to transport them. And that's not even a vision issue for the parents. They just don't have transportation, so,
Right.
and we've had many staff over the years look into, is there any place that would fund an Uber card, a whatever, to help with that? And we've just always hit brick walls. So it's just we are not in a part of the country that has great mass transit systems. And
I will tell you though, Lisa, after having done some work with the rideshare companies in recent years, that Lyft is a lot more open than Uber in terms of working out partnerships like that.
Okay.
And it is possible to get funding for things like that, especially if it's like a life skills kind of thing, or a workforce development skills, like, anything that's STEM or STEAM related and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's often, rather than, oh, this is just something fun to do socially, like if it has an educational purpose to it, you're more likely to get that funded. As I tell people all the time, being a grant writer, organizations don't fund positions. They don't fund staff, they fund programs. Programs need staff to run, right? But we're not saying we need you to give us money so we can hire 3 people. No, we need you to give us money so we can, have the cast of tens or thousands or whatever it is in order to implement this program and do what we say we're going to do.
Exactly. Right.
So when you come at it from that perspective, I'll see if I can pull up any info out of my history about Lyft, and if I find it, Lisa, I will.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I will say that we just this week actually got an Uber, and I haven't used this yet, so Natalie might have to jump in here. We got an Uber business account, and that's because we were working on a project and we specifically added in the project transportation for these people to do this thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In whatever way that we were going to make it work. And because we're in Belleville in the middle, even if someone took the Metrolink, someone was going to have to go get them from the Metrolink.
Yeah.
And again, time, I don't know if you all ever ride the Metrolink all the way to Belleville. It's a longer trip. So we just started using this, the Uber business account, and there were some interesting things on there that I was unfamiliar with that seemed really cool, like the fact that you could track where they were in the Uber. Like, we were a little nervous about, okay, we're just going to order this Uber and we're going to assume that you're going to show up in it. Good luck, so things like that, so you can track them, you can set up the Uber, they don't have to call the Uber themselves, things like that, which have been helpful this week. You have anything you want to add to that, Natalie? Maybe
Natalie's
not.
taking a
Oh,
nap.
there she is.
No, that definitely made me feel better. And so it was interesting to use. I had never utilized that either, like reserving a ride ahead of time, and all of that, which actually those ones are the professional, like Uber Black, at least in our area, are the ones that are reserved for that. And we had a phenomenal experience. He actually even walked in, our patron, our narrator who was working on this, and it ended up being really great. So hopefully that seems to be getting better, and that can, potentially be a resource for people. That being said, that is like the highest priced tier. So
Yeah.
that is unfortunate. But it's a lot easier to call for a pickup afterward. That's not at a reserved time, then like I need to be here at a specific rate. I can wait a couple minutes for whoever's closest to come before that, but it has potential, I think. And certainly if there's some way to either get a grant for that kind of thing or work out a partnership, as you mentioned, Vicki, with Lyft or something where they would kind of have redeemable rides and all of that, I think has a lot of exciting potential for all of our venues.
Well, and the only other thing I would say is, if you are looking for like a little bus to take people from hither to yon, over the years, I've seen some success with organizations partnering with local churches, because a lot of the churches have buses for their elders in the community that need a ride to church and such. And so as long as it's not on a church day, which for some places is just Sunday, for temples and synagogues could be Saturday, or and also on Wednesday sometimes. So as long as it's not on any of those 3 days, it's entirely possible that if you just reach out to a couple of your local community churches that have a bus or transportation, and just talk with them about it. Especially, like, I hate to say this because I always joke around about this. My college professor said to me, and this is about PR, but it's translated into grants and such too. You got to think about it like bloody puppies. You got to write your grants like, oh, look at the puppies, they're so cute. Oh no, they're bloody. We must do something about it, right? So like there are certain areas of nonprofit that are more easy to say yes to than others, let's say. And I think that folks with visual impairment, kids who are deaf, anybody who utilizes a wheelchair for whatever reason, including veterans, those sorts of folks are a lot easier to say yes to. And so, don't be afraid to go and ask those questions, because a lot of times nobody's asking them. They don't even think to ask them,
Another place, I'm glad that you brought up churches, because another place that has that sort of van that might be, I think we have used some in the past, are senior centers and assisted living places. And they might have rules like you have to show up here. We're not going around and picking people up, but if you we'll start here and end here. That's a possibility too. Because also the things like that, those people are insured in that way. They're professional in that way. They know what they're doing. They know how to drive those vans. You know, I don't want Bob and his van to come, you know, pick us up. And part of the reason we were able to get this money specifically for transportation, I don't know, I'm probably lying. I don't know how often we actually ask for transportation in a grant. The reason we were very specific that we needed transportation money is because it's the same project, this public artworks project. We were the main part of the project. The reason we were doing this project was all of our narrators are blind, and they were coming into the studio, to our recording studio, to record. So we specifically wanted to make it accessible for the people who were going to be the narrators to come in and use our equipment and, you know, have the whole experience. And I don't know how successful we'd be in general of just saying, and we want some money for, you know, Ura Black to pick up people, and take them around. But I was glad that at least the folks that got to experience it this week, it was a good experience for how it worked out. So
Absolutely.
On that note, though, I mean, I don't know, I probably know enough to not even be dangerous, to be honest, but like when you're kind of sending this information out and kind of marketing it to people and like what you do and things like that, are you targeting people like in the nursing homes? Like some of the nursing homes I know are probably nursing homes that people don't have a lot of money, but some do, you know, and there is, you know, vision loss as you get older and not being able to drive. And I'm just like thinking about, do people who have access to a piece of transportation like that, who also might have macular degeneration, are like, is that information getting marketed to them too? Like, are these events, like, I know nursing homes take their people out on outings, you know, I know they go and do things. So are they even aware that these kinds of resources exist? So if they're going on an outing to whatever, maybe they make it at a time when the audio is available, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't think we hit them nearly as much as we should. I remember I went before we actually describe the show, we go and preview the show and we do the pre-work. And I remember one time last season, I went to a preview and there were probably 100 people in there that all came from assisted living places. And they were like, oh yeah, this is our preview that is for people from assisted living. And I was like, how many of these people could be using audio description right now?
Right, exactly.
They didn't know that audio description was available. We didn't know that theater did that. And that was like, there was none of us knew anything was happening.
Right.
And I thought, why are we not doing this at the same day? Like, this doesn't make any sense. This is the day that we should be offering audio description, but it's the same thing no one knew. And it was also something that, you know, well, we've always done it this way for 15 years or something like that. And, you know, it's generally not a day that's open to the public. It's not an advertised date on their calendar. Because I actually went in thinking it was a rehearsal. I didn't think there was going to be anyone there. And then there's 100 people there from assisted living places. And I was like, what is happening? Where are all these people coming from? And they should be listening to our audio description. There are definitely people here that could be utilizing this service. So,
because even if they're not totally blind, that doesn't mean that they have great vision for something that's across the room from them, you know.
Let me throw this out there to you, Lisa, because I think honestly, when you're working in the disability community, or at least in my experience, everybody gets so many emails. Like when we're talking about marketing, like it's so many freaking emails. How would they know what you're doing compared to anybody else?
Right.
So we have a program at Laumeier that's called Opening Minds Through Art, which came out of the Scripps Center at the University of Miami. And we partner, well, it has been college students. We're looking at maybe high school now, one-to-one with people with dementia in care homes. And they do one-on-one work with them on no-fail art projects. And it's really uplifting. And there's a series of 10 sessions that they do it. And then it culminates in an art show at the center, right? So we offer it free of charge to nursing homes. So The thing hasn't been, does anybody want this free program? It's that all of these activities directors get bombarded with so much crap with people trying to sell them stuff that in their mind, if you're doing it for free, there's got to be a catch. So what we have learned is that when it comes to things like that, if you really do want to market it and you want to start expanding that, find the centers that are closest to where you are. Find out who their activity director is. Sometimes it's easy as going on their website or a phone call or going on LinkedIn, and then literally come with a little packet about your stuff. Walk in and shake hands with that person and tell them we have this stuff, and we can get you signed up for our newsletter so you know when performances are happening or whatever it might be. But that face-to-face interaction counts, because when we send them emails, we don't get any response. But as soon as Stacy walks into a place and is like, "Hi, I'm Stacy, and this is what we're doing, and we're not going to charge you a thing," they're like, "When do you want to start? Like, let's get this done." They're ready to roll. So I think it's not so much a matter of are they aware, it's are you having that meaningful interaction with them where they can understand what it is you're really providing. Because if you're solely relying on paper or email marketing anymore, even digital marketing, we're so overwhelmed with it that face-to-face contact really matters when you're dealing with folks in the disability community.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we tend to respond to that more often too, is that direct communication rather than an email or something that feels a little less personal.
And something that I haven't mentioned, Lisa, that you might not know, is for MindsEye, our services, because not just because, but in case people don't know, the ADA says this, our services, audio description services, are always free to the person that's using the service. So if you are blind and you're going to a show, you are not paying for audio description. Now, who is paying for it is the venue or the theater or the whoever, the quote unquote host is who's paying for it. So oftentimes there is a little bit of a communication breakdown, and is this free? Is it free? I'm confused about like just what you said. If a venue is already there, just if we're providing audio description at the Muni on that day, and in either the Muni or MindsEye goes to that assisted living place, and I actually think the Muni does do this, so that's probably a good example.
Be surprised. They're a very old organization.
They go directly to that activities director and say, "Hey, we're offering this, and for you it is free." So the Muni is paying us, but for you it's free. So pointing that out would be important. MindsEye used to have a lot more interaction, I think, with assisted living or at nursing homes in general, because of our broadcast information service. There used to be a lot more direct information that came between the two, because that would be the literal actual radio sitting in the room. That's just us talking 24/7, or it might even be in a lot of the places it was actually the radio station that played all day long over the intercom, or whatever, something like that. And as times have changed, we have lost a good deal of those connections, and I'm just sitting here thinking, I don't think I have a single connection that's from an assisted living facility. Now Angela works a lot with a couple like aging groups, but I don't know that I don't have any direct contact, so maybe some more hookups there would be a good way to go.
Yeah, if nothing else, just to get the word out there.
And maybe get some transportation while we're at it.
And get some transportation. You might get
double duty with one stone. Right. So as I said, we've gone through a lot of these questions without even asking them. What's the best way to let people know that your audio described events are available? Public transportation is difficult. Another one is, would you consider offering a discount for a companion to accompany me since I can't drive myself? And this next to transportation, ticket price comes up a lot. So discounted tickets come up a lot, or also companion tickets, or whatever the name might be there. The idea of, can we get 2 for the price of 1 because I need this person to be there. Now, I just learned in our last session about SSPs are available for people who are deafblind, and they're underutilized. And I'm going to get some clarification on exactly who can use an SSP, who's available, because my understanding is that can also help with transportation problems. So that person is assigned to be with them on that activity. So that includes the transportation and being with them. And that is for dual sensory. So, and we have a lot of people who are either blind with hearing loss or are hard of hearing with some sight loss. We do have people who are, we do have some of our folks who are deafblind or can, have a different degree. But I think most people, when you hear deafblind, you think, oh, you immediately go to like Helen Keller or, extremes. And you think, well, why would they need audio description anyway? A lot of that is more someone who is blind and they have some hearing loss. So they might be using our equipment with a cochlear implant, or they might be using it with a hearing aid, or we have some people that use hearing assist in one ear and audio description in the other ear. So I'm going to be looking into how we can connect some of our folks possibly with SSPs to work together to set that up. Now, again, that's only a portion of the people who would be doing this. But that brought up the question of who's paying for that person's ticket.
Yeah.
You are the person that's going. You have requested this person to be your, I don't know what the appropriate term is here, your companion for the day for this event. Are they sitting next to you because they're going to need a ticket to get in? Is that your responsibility? Is that the venue's responsibility?
Again, I would think that much like writing transportation into a grant, if this is going to be part of your standard accommodation and it's specifically for people that have A, B, or C, and you have some sort of policy and procedure in place for that to happen, right? That it shouldn't be an issue for whatever grantor to say, yeah, you know what, for up to X number of people. And you can look on historic ticket sales to see like how many people with vision impairment came to our shows, if that's obviously data that's accessible to you. But you can also base it on percentages of, I'm sure we've all got statistics on how many people in the St. Louis metro area have visual impairment or what have you. And we can even do it by zip code in the census sometimes.
Yeah.
So, like if you're looking at it that way, then you could say, okay, if this program is intended to serve 1,000 people, and we're going to assume that out of that 1,000 people, 300 of them have some form of visual or hearing impairment that might need this issue. Okay, so we need to account for potentially 300 companion tickets, right? But then the cost of the ticket, that's what you got to think about. And that's going to be according to your budget. Do you just want to cover the base costs of that ticket that contribute to covering the cost of the program? Or are you actually looking for that additional income or revenue? Because then you have to count it as revenue in your budget, right? Whereas if it's just the flat out cost of whatever the ticket is without that profit, then it's a different thing. So like, I think part of this is figuring out what is it that you really need to cover the cost of, right?
And who's covering the cost, because it's interesting because there are places where that's the venue's policy. So the venue has a policy of a companion ticket, and same thing, we're talking about cost versus revenue. And but we also have things like Lighthouse for the Blind. They buy the tickets at full price or probably at a group rate. And then they're selling it for half price to tickets. So it's Lighthouse that's eating that cost, basically. And, it would be less money lost mathematically if that was the venue, right? Because that's the base
The cost
cost
of doing
of
business, right?
right, of the price versus selling them for full price to Lighthouse and then Lighthouse eating half of that cost. Now convincing a venue
Right.
that their money is different than Lighthouse's money it is a different thing. But imagine, you know, Lighthouse only has a budget of so much, so they currently do that with the Fox and with Cardinals tickets. We work with 35 different organizations, so if some of those venues could pick up some of those costs, Lighthouse isn't going to pick up another 33, you know, and that's, and, you know, we have like this year, we're at over 150 events, you know, we can't ask anyone, especially just one organization like Lighthouse, like, hey, you should pay for all the tickets all the time for everybody.
Right.
Instead of, and now there are places like the Muni gives society tickets. There are places that give some tickets sometimes, usually not to us. we are almost always buying our tickets.
And you know, I mean, this might be an opportunity for MindsEye, Megan, to create like a cultural experience fund that people could contribute to, that could cover the costs for tickets for companions or even people who can't afford to go to those types of things typically.
And ticket price in general next to transportation is the number one thing we hear. And you know, it's great that we are doing a lot of sporting events. Well, this was the first year for City. I don't know if any of you got to go to a City match. Those tickets are not cheap. They're expensive tickets. And there are venues like the Cardinals games, you can still get you know, you can walk up and get a $10 ticket. That's because they have 40,000 seats. I mean, they have a lot of seats to choose from. But even theaters, you know, some of our ticket prices for theaters are $80 a ticket. It's just not plus your transportation if you're gonna get something like an Uber because it's the only way to get there, it's a super expensive night. So you know, finding a way. Now, one thing we do ask our venues, this doesn't always happen, but a lot of times, you know, say a venue has a show for 2 weeks, it's running for 2 weeks, and we're there on one Thursday or 2 Thursdays or something. They might have a coupon that's available for Tuesdays. So we do ask, hey, you have this coupon available that's on Tuesdays, it's not available on Thursdays. Can you make a coupon that's for the same amount for the people who use audio description? And some will do it and some don't. But the thought is you're asking someone to choose a price that is more affordable or a show that is accessible. So, you know, we're not asking you to create a discount because a person is blind. We're asking you to give an equal discount as you're giving on a different day. And I think, and we actually have included that in our contract now. I think that's on me for not enforcing it more than we should. But, you know, making people more aware of that. And of course, you know, we have lots of venues that, you know, we're small budget and it's hard for us to give discounts for things, and like, but you are paying us X amount of dollars and no one shows up. So you're not making money off those tickets that no one is using. You're just paying us. You know, people who are blind spend money too.
Oh goodness. Oh gosh, don't even ask me about that. I got so many statistics on the dollar bills of disability and the secondary and tertiary communities that surround people with disabilities, and like it's like $1.7 trillion a year.
Wow.
It's a lot of money, you know what I mean? So no, looking at people with disabilities as people who do not have money to spend is not entirely accurate. We're judicious with how we're spending our money. You know, I went and saw Wicked with my husband for our anniversary this year, and I got wheelchair seats because I was like, hells yeah, you know, that's awesome. Because are they the best seats in the house? No, they're not the best seats in the house,
Yeah.
they are accessible. I don't have to worry about people crawling over me or me having to get up and down over and over.
Mhm.
And almost always there's at least 2 seats available for any given show, so for me, that is a wonderful benefit. But I think the thing that always frustrates me is I know that people buy season tickets to things like the Muni or the Fox or whatever, or box seats for Cardinals games and stuff like that. And then they don't use them. And sometimes they give them away and company stuff and all that. But I would much rather see the actual venues talk to their members or their seasonal ticket holders and say, if for whatever reason you're going on vacation, so you can't go to this production during this week, give your tickets to us. These are the partners that we can share those tickets with. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
that'd be
all of
great.
those partnerships like they have with you, they could say, hey, guess what? We happen to have 16 tickets for this show coming up, because then those tickets are already paid for. You got butts in the seats. It makes the
Right.
actors and all of the production crew feel like, hey, we got a full house. And people who
Mhm.
want to see the show can be there, Otherwise, it's just wasted space. It's like a vacation home in the middle of town.
Right. That would be great. I would love it. The only bad thing about that is oftentimes that's too last minute for our folks.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
need to have a long lead up time, mostly because of that transportation question that we keep going
Right.
back
Which is
to.
fair, but it's
Yeah.
worth putting it out
Yeah.
there to them and just
Mhm.
saying, hey, as long as we could have, a heads up, like they could even say, oh, we've noticed that, traditionally this week during the summer, so many people are out of town on vacation that we have less attendance,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? But there's so many seasonal Muni ticket holders, so many of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had at least 4 different people who were just in my social circle offer me tickets to various shows
Mhm.
over the last year. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could, but and it's kind of tough, and it's last minute and I can't do that Friday night. So I get that. But I think
Yeah.
that sometimes people do know in advance. And so
Mhm.
like if that would be possible, maybe there's a way for there to be some sort of database where they could be like, as soon as someone says that, they go bloop and it shows up on your radar,
Mhm.
or Lighthouse for the Blind or Delta Gamma Center.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I was like, wait,
No, that's okay.
which way does it go? I don't know. It's just a thought, but like,
Yeah.
these are things to think about, I think, going forward in these partnerships, because with you providing this service and consistently working with them on updates and additions for any new shows they have and things like that, that the way for them to give back, aside obviously from paying you for your services, right? Because anything they do like that is a write-off for them if they
Right.
are a tax-paying organization.
Right.
It's a nonprofit, but it's still a partnership.
Mhm.
And that stuff you can put on your website, you can put in your newsletters, you can put in your annual reports. Like these are all things that all of us as nonprofits need
Yeah.
to demonstrate our mission and how we are actively trying to increase accessibility,
Mhm.
and inclusion for that matter.
Yeah.
Or sense of
Right.
belonging, I think that's the latest
Yeah.
in the
Sense
list.
Sense
of
of
Right?
belonging.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is true, because like I've definitely worked at organizations where members of the staff have been like, well, we don't tell anybody they can't come here. That doesn't mean you feel welcome. You know what I mean? Like just because you can physically walk in doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you
Also-
feel welcome there.
Yeah.
Also, thanks for like doing the bare minimum to not break the law, like
Right? Yeah. So I'm like,
Oh.
but that's not the point. The point is,
Right.
if you live in this part of town, you know the demographics that live immediately around you, and you want to diversify those demographics. How do you meet people where they are?
Yeah.
How are you reaching out to them? How are you talking to them? What kind of information, what kind of artwork are you bringing for them to see so they can, or experience, as it were,
Mhm.
so that they can feel like this is a reflection of who I am, and that's why it interests me, because it makes me think deeper, which is ultimately what all of us as arts organizations want to do, is sort of drive
Mhm.
that conversation.
Mhm.
And I think that when we talk about people with disabilities, we look so much at the cannot, right? Or the technology that now allows us to do amazing things, that we
Mhm.
miss the whole thing. It's still people that want to have
Right.
the same experiences as everybody else.
Right. And I heard a good, I think this was at the LEAD conference. We were talking about the same thing, like how do we get our venues and our communities together? And one organization, I forgot who it was, some theater museum, somebody like that, they started going to, they had like a, I don't know, community engagement or some person whose job it was to actually go to all of the events that all of these other places were having that had nothing to do with them. So if they were having a walkathon, they went to the walkathon, and it wasn't just like tabling events. It wasn't like, we're here to represent our organization and, you know, to tell you about our theater. If they were having a bake sale, they went to their bake sale. Like all of these things that they literally just tried to, this is probably not the word I should use, but kind of just tried to ingratiate themselves in everything they did with all of these communities, and it turned into real relationships. You know, so no matter what it was, you know, that was someone's job, was to physically go to every event that they could find for all of these things. They would be going to this open house where, you know, someone's showing their artwork. That was their job. And then, yeah, it was easy then for them to say, hey, here are all of our audio described events, and people would show up because they knew them, and they just like what you just said, they knew that it wasn't just, oh, they have audio description available. It was, they care that we show up. They really aren't just providing audio description to say that they are accessible. They're part of our community now. So I think it was that sort of thing. I was kind of mind boggled. I was also mind boggled that someplace like that could afford to pay someone whose job was to go to events like that. So maybe that's an extreme sort of version, but just trying to get involved in that sort of way that's a more real level, a more personal level. You have an event, we're going to be there. It doesn't matter if it's not specifically about us. And make those real connections. Not, oh, I have an e-intro from this person to this person, so now we're connected, and now I'm going to send you a newsletter every month and you should show up now.
Well, and I think that ideally, you know, because again, I've been in nonprofit for 30 some odd years. So how it functions now as opposed to how it functioned 30 years ago is a whole different ball of wax. But back when I started, that was the role of your board members.
I shouldn't guffaw like that.
But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I remember board members having to sign contracts to say, I'm going to raise this amount of money. If I can't write you a check, I'm going to raise this money. This is my agreement. If I don't do this by the end of this year, I'm off the board. Like it was, it wasn't like, oh, we're so lucky to have this person on our board. This is a working cooperative relationship. You get to say you're on our board, and we get to say we're proud to have you on our board because look what you do for us. You obviously care. Like that's supposed to be the idea, not just a line on a CV. And unfortunately, I think too often, I'm not speaking about anybody's board in particular, but I think just in general, too often folks see it as a point of prestige rather than a commitment to an organization. Yeah. And I wish that we could kind of go back just a little bit, not like the good old days were better, you know what I mean? But I feel like when you have that kind of engagement with your board, because like I can count probably on one hand the number of board members that I've meaningfully engaged with, at my current organization. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way that it is, and partly that I work from home, but I think that having even those relationships between the board and the staff, so that if there is an opportunity for a staffer who's well connected with a patron, sees a board member and goes, oh, hey, John, come meet Mary. Those are the ways that you really develop those relationships, when they can see that your organization works in a very holistic way.
Right.
But of course, that's ideally.
Ideally, but I do love
if we could solve the world's problems, right?
Nobody would need to beg for funding. That's
only they would listen to us, right? Like that's so,
I do love the idea of pointing that out to these orgs, though, that everybody has a board. We all have boards, and here all of these all of these organizations that we partner with in some way, ask your board, would anyone like to go over to Delta Gamma's kids club garage sale with
especially anyone on the DEAI committee?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yes. That sort of thing. And sometimes I feel like because of the amount of information that I'm trying to get from a venue, because I'm working with a lot of logistics. I'm working with getting a script, with getting the questionnaires, with getting these very specific things so our describers can do a good job describing. The number one thing that we lose is the community relations, but then it also becomes this very professional, mechanical, this is what I need from you. And then if I were to say like, hey, Society for the Blind's having this event, you guys want to go over and hang out over there? They might be like, I've sent, you've sent me 14 emails this week asking me to do things. No, I've got a job to do. So, softening that a little bit, is gonna be a problem for me personally. I need someone else to be that softener that's like, yeah, she needs these very specific things that she has to have for this job to work, but also we want everyone to be friends. So yeah, I gotta work on that, because that is something that we get from the venues, is like, you just keep putting more work on me. Like, I'm trying to run a show here. Like, don't you understand? Like, I'm trying to work with a cast and a crew and, all of these things. And then you're asking me things. And then you also want me to go do some partnership lovey-dovey thing. No.
Right.
But then how are people going to know that you're having it? And are people going to show
And
up?
why don't you just go and say, hey guys, why don't we do a surprise raffle at your event? Here's 2 tickets to my show.
Love it. Yes. Show up at their random event with tickets to your show. Here you go.
And be like, give me your email address and we're going to do a drawing. You know what I mean? And then you get a couple of tickets. And like, that's a way for them to promote their show.
Yep.
And still
Right.
come out and support and show that you care about having, folks who need accessibility tools at your shows.
Yeah. Great.
Inclusiveness, sense of welcoming.
We're down to just our last few minutes, so I want to make sure that if there are any like specific questions, burning things that you want to talk about, that we get those in.
Yeah, no, again, I think my biggest question was you know what, I'll reiterate, because I don't think we were recording at that point. Is that we've had several, you've sent us several samples of folks
Yes.
that are different describers, and men and women in various types of voices and cadences to their voice and tone and all of that. And so I think at this point we're going to probably narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 different voices, because we thought that a variety of voices would be more interesting just in general than just listening to one person's voice.
And one thought that I had for you guys, how many different sections did you have?
I think it's 5 or 6. I'd have to do that. I think it's 5 or 6.
So one thought I had was that, one of those, like, it would be the same voice for that section, but different voices.
I will say this though, the challenge there is that, for example, Eastern Woodland encompasses a whole lot.
Yeah,
right?
that's a lot. Yes,
got like 20 some odd sculptures back there, whereas the Northern Grove is like 5.
Yeah.
So sort of the balance there. I think,
it would be. Yes, I'm with you.
I get where you're going with that, so that it could be specific, and then that could also be sort of an oral reminder of where you are.
That's what that was what I was thinking
for this section.
Yeah,
and I will certainly bring that up with the team, because I think that's potentially a very good idea. But then I know they're going to want to have some input. Right. Who has the most lines? So
right. Yeah, I do. I can definitely see that. And I can, I listened to one recently. I listened to a lot of like random museum image descriptions. But it was really interesting, because some of them had 2 voices in the same description, like in one thing. And one of them was because they kind of did like a generic, not image description, but it was like their regular description, I guess I would say. That was one voice, and then the actual image description was a different voice.
Oh, that makes sense though.
So that is actually pretty common if you're doing two different things. I actually think it was in the same track, which I thought it was a little weird that if you were going to have them that way, and it may have also been that you could have chosen to not listen to image description. So then I guess that would make some sense too. But I will say, because of the number of descriptions that you have, that would be a lot of one voice.
It's a
It
lot.
would be
It's a
like
lot.
listening. And I don't know that anyone's just gonna, sit down or even be live and in person, be like, I'm going to listen to every description of every
Let me
sculpture.
put it to you this way. There are, I think, a little over 70 sculptures on site at the park, and that doesn't include ones that we have tucked away or, that are in storage and all sorts of things like that. And riding on a golf cart with my boss, going around and stopping for a very brief amount of time so I could snap a picture, take a note, in order to get my mapping project started, took 3.5 hours.
Mm.
And that was just
Yeah.
going to see every single one driving a golf cart. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Just
So,
imagine
like,
listening to one person's voice.
and we don't anticipate that somebody, for example, is
Right.
going to listen to the entire thing all at once.
Right.
It's more often that people will go, let me see the pictures,
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
This is
Okay,
the one
I
I
want
want
to
to
go
know
see
about.
that sculpture.
Yeah.
But then, again, when we come to Laumeier, you can't touch a screen and
Yeah.
in a tactile way, right?
Yeah.
So the only thing that we would be able to provide for folks is some sort of audio description.
Mhm.
Because like certainly even if you have visual impairment, our app is exceptionally screen reader friendly, and we certainly describe what's going on. We're doing the audio descriptions of the sculptures and the sites themselves.
Mhm.
But then when you think about the texture of something, what color it is, does it change because it's under a tree or in the sunlight, like those sorts of things. How in depth do you go? I think that's, and again, it's going to come back to a subjective
Right.
experience of it.
And it will always be. So I think that I am glad that actually you realize that, because sometimes it's just like people will just be like, but that's not what I see. Like, okay, that's great. That's not what you see. This is what I see. But at some point we just got to record something. Like, we have to come to the agreement that we all know. And we have I have someone that said to me about description, I just trust that the describer is using their judgment of what they see. And I understand that that's what they see. That's not what the whole world sees.
Mhm.
And I have to know that I trust my describer during that time.
Mm.
And I thought that was really smart and really also really helpful for the describer to not get so super bogged down in making sure that they say the word that they think is the most correct word. Use the word that works for you, that makes sense to you, and know that they trust you, that that's the word that you would use because that's what you see.
Mhm.
And I thought it was very freeing as a describer, when she said, I trust that the describer is telling me what they see, not just how they think I should see it.
Well,
Mhm.
and then, if you go deeper into that, you get into the anthropological and sociological sides of what types of voices sound trustworthy, are calming,
Right. Right.
honestly, like,
Mhm.
and again, so subjective depending
Right.
on what your
Mhm.
background is like, what your family experiences were growing up. Like, there's no way to account for every single person.
Right.
So how do we, try and come up with the 80% solution or the 90%
Right.
solution,
Right.
Mhm.
Well, great.
So
Well,
we're
we are
doing
at,
it by consensus, really, is what it's coming
yes.
down to with us. Is we're like, we're all listening and going, okay, this is how I'm ranking the voices. This is what I want to hear them do, and kind of coming together and going, okay, I think we can all agree on this.
And if it comes down to like, we don't like any of these voices, or we can at this point we can ask again if there's anybody else, although I think you got the people who most often do that sort of work for us, but
Yeah,
there may
well,
be other
and
ones.
the thing that I enjoyed so much, I think I told you after you sent us the first round of descriptions, is as a writer, I'm reading what they're writing, right? Like, I'm not
Mhm.
listening to them yet.
Right.
So reading how they write tells me actually a lot about them as people, like what sort of probably educational background or experiential background or professional background they might have had, you know, based on the words they use, the language they use, the way they put phrases together.
Mhm.
And there were some of them that I felt like, ooh, this is a much more like lively description to me. It gives me different brain pictures,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
than some of the other folks. And so for me, that mattered. But whereas, you know, then Stacy's like, nope, you know what? We're going to have the educational team take a look at this because they're the ones who are using this the most in terms of like working with docents, working with the public, doing programs with youth and all of that. So we're really taking their feelings on it into consideration, the educational side, even more than curatorial, believe it or not.
Interesting.
Simply because it's not as much about how are we presenting the artist. That's up to curatorial.
Right.
And that text is already there and your screen reader can read it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
But it's more about how do we explain this to a 5-year-old?
Mhm.
You know, how do you explain it to a 5-year-old who can't read the text or see the sculpture?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
and so in thinking of it in that way, I think that that is definitely influencing the way that we're writing and rewriting descriptions and the way that they will probably be read too,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know, because if they don't jive with the way we put them together, maybe they won't be as engaging when they speak. I
Right.
don't know.
Right.
Right.
Well, we are right at 5 o'clock. So
This was
that was
really a
the-
pleasure today, ladies. I
Oh,
really
I'm-
enjoyed our
I'm-
conversation.
I'm glad that you had a good time. I think we came up with some good ideas. I'm going to get together some information from all of the sessions and send out the recordings to everyone who's here, everyone who said they were coming, everyone who is an active venue with us. I'm gonna send it to a lot of people. I think partly because a lot of people need to hear all of these things, but I'll also make it kind of a list of like, here are some bullet points because nobody again is gonna sit through all these hours of listening
Sure.
to us chat.
Right.
But if you're so inclined, feel free. So thank you for coming. And
Thank you.
I reach it was nice to meet you, Lisa.
Yes, nice to meet
Yeah,
both of
Lisa,
you.
we'll have
Yes.
to have lunch since you're right down
I
the
know.
street from
We
me.
are right down the street. Exactly.
Yes, and work out all of your little things that you can do together. So
Right.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
Mhm.
Natalie, it was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys too. What a great chat.
all
I
right.
feel like it was sort of the three of us kind of, Natalie's just kind of listening and going, no.
Oh, I've
No.
got my notes here. Don't worry.
She knew
Right
I would
on,
ask her
lady.
for notes later. So
All right.
okay.
Have a
Thanks,
great
everybody.
night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.